on this episode of Edge of the Web.
Google did this research and they found that about 30% of serious search needs were currently unfulfilled.
Wow.
In other words, there's another trillion searches out there, right? You do a trillion on the desktop, you do a trillion on mobile, and there's another trillion that are currently not fulfilled, which are largely fulfilled by voice.
Your weekly digital marketing trends with industry trend-setting guests. You're listening and watching Edge of the Web. Winners of Best Podcast from the Content Marketing Institute for 2017. Hear and see more at edgeofthewebradio.com. Now, alongside Tom Broadbeck, here's your host, Aaron Sparks.
Welcome back. Hey, we're broadcasting from Edge Media Studios, located in downtown Indianapolis, Indiana. Every week, we bring you the latest trends in digital marketing and marketing influencers. Check out all the recent shows at edgeofthewebradio.com. We're actually powered by Site Strategics, your digital marketing pioneers, specializing in the agile digital marketing strategy and execution. If you want to know what that is, it's a focus on being able to be flexible with your marketing budget and be able to give you more tactics that lead to better results month over month. So if you want to check out more, go over to Site Strategics, that's SITE, strategics.com, and learn more. They're right there on the bottom of the screen is a way to download our agile marketing document that you can download and have a look at all the things that we can do for your organization. My name is Aaron Sparks. I'm the host of Edge of the Web, and as well as CEO of Site Strategics. We actually have our digital director of digital marketing, digital media. My Lord, I did it again. Tom Broadbeck. He's actually manning the booth today, so I don't have him as my cohort in crime, but he's there.
I'm still here. I just won't be on camera as much.
Is something wrong? Did you not shave today? What's going on there?
I think it's cooties.
So we've got Tom in the booth, basically quarantining himself, so to make sure that everybody's fine there.
Yep, we're all good.
Excellent. And who I wanted to also introduce to our audience is Will Critchlow, the founder and CEO of Distilled. Will, how are you doing today?
Very well, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
You're more than welcome. Will's coming out of London, England, so Will, we had to adjust our time a little bit to match you. What we got? About 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock right now?
5 p.m. Thanks for working around me. Yeah,
I don't do math well either. Well, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate you jumping on to the stream, and we certainly want to give a shout out to your tribe of followers, and we would love for them to join in our Facebook Live broadcast and ask questions of Will as we go through our interview. So we're going to jump in here real quick, but I want to tell you why we do what we do here at Edge of the Web. We have been doing this for 6 years running, show 252, and why we do this is to bring education about digital marketing tactics, demystifying what we do on a regular basis, and on top of that, also bringing some great influencers and marketing specialists to be able to share with you what's trending in the digital marketing space. This is very, very important to get a handle on what's happening because things move so quickly, and there's also a lot of potential bad players out there that give erroneous information, and we're trying to make sure we separate the wheat from the chaff. So, Will, you're one of the wheat separations. So, I guess feel
fingers crossed. I'll do my best.
All right, so we're going to jump into news here. Let's take you through the latest digital marketing news today.
I was very excited to start my reportings.
This week's trending topics.
All right, so we're excited to welcome our new sponsor again to the show, CoSchedule, the #1 marketing calendar for everything that you need to be organized. You no longer need complex spreadsheets, disconnected workflows, endless emails, or threads of emails to organize your marketing calendars. With CoSchedule, everything is organized in one place so you can create and collaborate on projects, assign tasks. Plus, you can also tie into social media directly from your marketing calendar. So most most importantly, CoSchedule has a powerful set of analytics so you can see your team's progress in one report. So consolidate your entire team and your entire team's marketing strategy into one tool set today. We got a great offer from CoSchedule. If for Edge of the Web listeners, the CEO of CoSchedule, Garrett Moon, is giving away 25 copies of his new book, The 10X Marketing Formula. All you need to do is go to the URL coschedule.com/edge of the web. It's right there on the screen. And you can actually go there to download the first chapter for free and be entered in for a free book. So check that out. And we certainly want to give our sponsors of the show some love. So all of the Edge of the Web listeners, we want to rally our team together and make sure that we demonstrate who you are and why you are so important to our ongoing existence here. We love to listen to you, but we also love to hear you support the sponsors of our show. All right, getting into news. Thanks for your patience there, Will. On Wired, Facebook tweaks newsfeed to favor content, friends, and family. Now, this was a big piece of news coming through, so check it out from the author, Fred Vogelstein. He says Facebook tweaks the news feed, and we may have all seen it already. CEO Mark Zuckerberg actually started sprinkling a new phrase, or perhaps a new idea, into his quarterly call with investors. He said, it's important to remember that Facebook is about bringing people closer together and enabling meaningful social interactions, he said. Research, he continued, demonstrates that interactions with friends and family on social media is particularly meaningful. The goal of his service is to encourage meaningful social interactions and to connect in ways that lead to meaningful interactions. So that's clear, right? But what they're actually starting to change here, they explained how the quest for this meaning will actually affect its core platform. They're changing the algorithm that powers its news feed. And the service at its core, and that is the service at its core, the news feed itself. So they're talking about actually changing the newsfeed algorithm will give less weight to the popularity of posts and more weight to posts that encourage users to interact and comment. So there is a little bit of opposition there. The popularity of posts has been gamified for a long time, and you can bring a heck of a lot of buoyancy if you get a lot of links. I got a lot of social likes, but they're actually changing it to be a bit more engaging, and most likely it's going to be dialed into more engaging to what you are looking for as opposed to what collectively business is churning up from value. Will, what do you think about this article?
Well, it's certainly big news if you're in media. I think that's the media echo chamber for sure kind of blew up around this. I think it's interesting. The Wired article calls out how many times he mentions meaningful, meaningful this, meaningful that. But I think actually almost as interesting is there's a particular turn of phrase that Zuckerberg uses when he talks about time well spent. And that is actually a very interesting turn of phrase because that is the name of an organization set up by, I think actually an ex-Facebook team member who was basically campaigning around how the social platforms and all this stuff were kind of damaging people's lives and people getting addicted to this stuff. And he was campaigning on this time well spent. It's interesting that I think Zuck is trying to reclaim that language for Facebook. So, I mean, my general thinking is, firstly, this was somewhat predictable. I think if anyone in media was massively surprised that Facebook would take a move like this, then they weren't really looking to the future, because we've seen the trends of what Facebook is prepared to prioritize and wants to prioritize, a whole bunch of times. We know that it's not necessarily organic reach of media partners. And I think there's a couple of big trends that come together here. Firstly, there's their monetization. So they're going to keep taking the advertisers' money, right? So you can still appear as an advert in the newsfeed. You can, but they're going to prioritize what they call these meaningful interactions. And I think if you look at the growth platforms within the Facebook family, so Instagram, for example, I mean, Instagram has no links out, right? Everything is entirely within the Instagram platform. And so we've been actually saying for a while, we expect to see the newsfeed go further that way. Maybe even as far as no links eventually. Oh my God. Outside of the Facebook platform, right? Maybe you still have instant articles, or you still have content they pull into that platform. But they're kind of taking this walled garden route. So I don't think it's surprising in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is I saw I forget who it was who tweeted it. Somebody saying, now we're going to find out who's really built an audience rather than just traffic, right? Like, you could use Facebook to drive huge amounts of traffic, but was there any loyalty there? Are these people going to seek out your brand? Mm-hmm. We've seen already hints of it coming from, did you see Jonah Peretti's piece the other day? So the BuzzFeed founder already starting to talk about using different language than we've seen him use in the past, where he's been previously open to just getting visibility on any platform that he could get it from. So yeah, I think the bulk of my thoughts are, if you're in media, you had to have started working on this some time ago, and really this was coming, mm-hmm. or something like it was coming. I think it will. I think it will work for Facebook. So I think the initial drop in their share price is probably misguided. I think Zuck knows exactly what he's doing, and their revenue is going to be fine. So I think from a business model perspective, I don't think anybody should be panicking about Facebook just yet. And I guess my other big thought on it is it's been shaped by Ben Evans, the analyst at Andreessen Horowitz, A16Z. Mm-hmm. He talks about how. So his language is, Facebook doesn't get to choose what's in your newsfeed. And his argument is very similar to an argument that he has about Google, which is Google doesn't get to choose who shows up in your search results, which on the surface of it is crazy because, who else gets to choose, right? These are the only people who get to choose what's in your newsfeed or what's in your search results. But in another sense, so they choose in the short term, but they don't choose in the long term.
Well, your behavior is choosing that. And
exactly.
It's all, yeah.
Yeah, they have to keep their users happy. And, if Google doesn't show good results, then people will choose a different search engine eventually. If Facebook doesn't show the kinds of things that users want to see in their newsfeed, then people will choose a different social platform eventually. And that what Facebook is in fact doing is surfing user behavior. And they've been incredibly good at this, right? This is, in fact, if there's a single thing that Zuckerberg has proven to be good at, it is that. It is seeing what users are starting to do on the platform and turn the platform into that thing. And you can see that all the way back to the very development of Newsfeed, where Newsfeed grew out of the fact that they realized that people were checking around the platform all day to see what their friends were doing. Because if you remember pre-Newsfeed, you only had your own wall, or you could go and look at other people's walls. Right, and they realized that people were collating this stuff manually, and they surfed that trend. So I think this is just continuing to surf those kind of trends.
And I think it also, I appreciate that insight. I think it also is demonstrating that the one additional variable is the behavior of the audience not engaging with those business feeds, the authentic users, nearly as much as the factor of like I said, the gamifying. We did some stories about in the Philippines, an entire bank of mobile phones clicking on articles, but also clicking and engaging inside Facebook just to build the engagement that would then likely attract more people to be able to engage. But what we're seeing is that they're paying attention to the outside influencers, and they're really paying attention to that internal consumer base that is kind of pushing away from this fictitious fake news. I think it really is a response to this entire 2 years of fake news amplification, right?
Yeah, I think probably broader than the narrow fake news definition that we see in, say the election cycle or whatever else, but the broader sense of, clickbait and manipulation and all of that kind of stuff. I think, actually, there was I don't think I ever wrote it, there was a post I meant to write a couple of years ago about essentially Facebook algorithm updates. So, those of us who come from the search world are used to what is now, 20 years of Google algorithm updates. And you look back over that history of algorithm updates and what they were trying to do. Some of them were very quality centric, but some of them were very much focused on the second and third order effects, right? The manipulation that came from those gamifiable factors. So, the first order effects are, well, let's treat quality links as more valuable. Let's do these things. Oh, now we need to follow some stuff. Oh, well, now we need to devalue these kind of links. There have been all this kind of cat and mouse kind of game. And actually, there's been relatively little of that on Facebook, I think, because so much of it is tied to real-ish identities and because more of it is tied to activity on the platform. So they see the whole thing.
Yep.
They don't have to crawl anything to find out what you liked. You like things within their platform. But now we're starting to see those things that Google saw much earlier in their life cycle of, well, what happens when people manipulate this stuff?
Yep.
And
You're absolutely right.
I think we're just going to see a ton of these, right? We're going to see everything. We're going to see the analogy of everything from Vince to Florida to Panda to Penguin to we'll see all of those kind of things in the Facebook ecosystem.
No, you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. Well, let's jump into another article here from Search Engine Journal with Matt Southern. AMP URLs will now show full publisher addresses, and we certainly always appreciate Search Engine Journal's contributions out there. Matt says the AMP URLs will soon drop the google.com AMP prefix and show the full address of the original publisher. The URLs of all AMPs in Google search began the google.com/AMP because the pages are not loaded from the publisher server. They're loaded from the AMP cache, or basically the CDN of the environment. This allows Google to control the AMP experience and ensure that the pages stay consistently fast. Publishers have been long at odds about this issue, and I think we have championed the same thing. Is we don't want to advertise Google. We want to demonstrate our own content. So they're finally actually at least displaying the URL. They're still going to be loading up the Google content, but at least you're going to be able to see the publisher's URL because that's our real estate, right?
Yeah, Tom here. Jumping in real quick. I don't know. I was kind of excited about I felt like this is something they should have launched with when they first launched AMP. Like I feel like it's a very basic thing. I'm sure more technically it's probably more technical than I think it is, but it's definitely something they should have launched with to begin with. But I don't know. We talk about how much we don't like AMP on the show, but I don't know. It seems like lately they've made a lot of updates to it, and I'm finding it harder and harder to not hate it as much.
Yeah. So I think wherever you fall on the spectrum of liking AMP to hating AMP, this is a good news announcement. I don't see any downside to this news, except possibly if you really hate AMP and you hate it no matter if they make it good or not, you just hate it anyway, then this is a bad announcement because it means that more people will use it. I don't know. So the thing, I don't think they could have announced this right at the beginning. And in fact, I don't think they can implement this straight away because my understanding of how it works is that it requires some kind of fundamental updates to actual infrastructure. So if they're going to continue to have a cache, so if you're not going to have the edge cache, then you can do what you like. But that's one of the key selling points of the AMP project, I guess, at least for people who want AMP. We can have that discussion. I mean, it sounds like you'll have covered it quite a lot. But
we love Google. We love Google. Everything that they do.
I personally like that they are pushing AMP because I think it will make the web faster and it will make the web better. But it has to not be the end game.
Right.
It has to be something that makes people make fast websites rather than being like, oh, there's a slow web and then there's this Google hosted version that is better. Anyway, we can go deeper into that. But the key thing I think is what they're talking about doing here is essentially actually impersonating those sites. So you would go to a URL and you would be served content from a different place than you might have expected to. And there are all kinds of mechanisms to stop this happening, right? So that's a kind of man in the middle kind of scenario. And currently, the way that works with something like a CDN, so if you have a content delivery network that's caching the content at the edge, similar to the way that an AMP cache would work, you normally have a commercial relationship with them, right? So you probably pay them, although you could even be on a free Cloudflare plan or something like that. But in any case, you've signed up. So you've taken action with them. And if you want to have an HTTPS powered website, then you have had to set up your security certificate with them, right? So if you have your domain pointing at a CDN, then that CDN has to have a version of your private key.
Right. And
for the domain or for the subdomain that they're serving. And the way the AMP project works, they're doing this without permission. Well, I mean, obviously there's some kind of implied permission by the fact that you're using the AMP format, but you certainly haven't set anything up, right? You haven't gone in and logged into an AMP console somewhere and uploaded an SSL key and all those kinds of things. So my understanding is that this enhancement needs a change to the fundamental transport layer stuff, so that browsers can so that you can kind of delegate authority, so that your website code could say this can be served securely from these locations, without necessarily having to upload your private keys. But I haven't gone deep into the technical spec of that. So I think that's possibly why they haven't done it previously, and possibly why this is only an announcement now rather than actually happening right now. I actually think that what they could have done straight away from the outset, though, is they could have had less of the Google Chrome. I don't mean Chrome, the browser. I mean the stuff around the outside.
Right.
They could have made it seem more like a native experience. They could have. I feel like the swiping between articles, some of those kind of things, those weren't necessary in my view for the core mission of the app project, as they stated, which is the speed thing. Like for the speed thing, you just need the cut down HTML and the edge hosted cache. You don't necessarily need the integration with search results and the swiping and the Chrome and the everything else.
So they wanted to be more of a utility to the consumer, because that's obviously who their target is. But the argument has been continually that they took conversion management away. They took so much of the aesthetic that we control at the mobile side, and the responsive side, and it left our hands. So they're asking us to do the dance again, right? But they really dropped it. I mean, and they've been working back to give us a little bit more control over the conversion points. But it's still, I mean, it just felt just blank.
Well, for me, it's summed up by the analytics side, actually. So I was fascinated to see that the initial rollout had analytics treatment being it essentially as a referral source. So they weren't seeing this as part of your website. This was baked into their view of how they were seeing this. This was more like an advert for your website.
That's right.
Than a part of your website. Whereas, to my mind, if you're reading an article that I've written, the entire article, that you're on my site. That is not an advert for my site. And I think that's the fundamental disconnect between the way that they set up the project and what people expected of it. And like you said, they've walked back a lot of that since then. I find it hard to resent it in one sense, because this whole thing's optional. You don't have to have AMP. You can completely. This is a thing they're doing to suggest a way of making it better. Right. And if you've got a better idea, you do you. That's fine. And I get that. This is okay, but it's kind of it's only when it overlaps with the inevitable monopolistic nature of Google that you're like, okay, I don't really have a choice here, do I? So I think that's the only problem I have with it. It's not really the technology or anything else. If this was a startup, if AMP was a startup, then I would have essentially no qualms with it. I'd have suggestions, but no real issues.
Resistance is futile. We might as well just accept everything they give us. That was also some of our resistance, but I think you're right. Is that it is optional? Everything they ask us to do for the betterment of the consumer is optional, and if you want to play in the lanes, right, you gotta take care of compliance there. All right, last article here is from Greg Sterling over at Search Engine Land, and we always pay attention to what's going on over there. Smart speaker sales grew 103% last year. The virtual assistant devices became the fastest selling consumer technology last year, dramatically outpacing wearables and VR. And if I'm not mistaken, one of the hottest items was that Google Echo at $30 or so. Literally, it exploded across the board as one of the top-selling items last year at Christmas time. The latest in a growing number of studies on voice search and virtual assistants, Adobe Digital Insights found the sales of voice assistants, let's assume just calling it smart speakers, right, grew roughly 103% in Q4 versus a year ago. Monthly sales, 79% took place in the fourth quarter. Yep, lots of gifts. So ADI's analysis is based on retail sales data and a survey of more than 1,000 U.S. consumers. According to the study, more than 50% of the consumers who own smart speakers use them at least daily, with 22% that they also shop using voice commands. So it's coming, and we talked to Dwayne about the smart environment, and we talked to a number of people about these smart searches, and the centralized home buying experience is among us. I mean, it's coming to us.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting there a little bit further down in the article. It talks about the 4 most common common uses for the voice assistants, and it's listening to music, checking the weather, asking fun questions, and researching. And I think the fifth point is asking Alexa to fart. But I think that's.
Have you checked out the Star Trek noises that Alexa makes?
I have not. No.
It fires photon torpedoes, fires phasers, and you can get a skill on there that gives you the entire background sound effect of the bridge. I kid you not.
There you go.
It is awesome.
Nobody tell my kids.
So, Will, smart speakers, the entire voice search. What do you think?
So, step one, I'm going to say let's split speakers and voice search. I think that the boom in smart speakers is actually quite a lot different to the boom in voice search. And so you listed those top use cases. Mm-hmm. Incidentally, I think they missed one. The setting a timer is like the main use case that I hear from everybody talking about it, because it's hands-free and you're in the kitchen, and kitchen is where everybody has this device. I think
I just turn my lights on with it. I'll do that, and then I put it on the Christmas tree, and the kids it was like a strobe effect. That
is pretty cool. Yeah. So I think anything you have it deliberately connected to, you've got to use, right? If it's connected to your Nest, or it's connected to your lights, or it's connected to whatever else, it's the command line for your home, if you like. If in the absence of things that you've proactively connected it to, I think the top native experience is things like setting a timer, or weather, or travel, or whatever. Mm-hmm. Generic searches, Alexa's pretty terrible at general knowledge questions. And this is where I think, so the Google Home is much better at this.
Yep.
At least I assume. I actually haven't used Google Home. I've used OK Google plenty, but I assume it's similar. But the Alexa is terrible at this. And I don't know if you saw that who released it the other day? I retweeted a thing of the top uses of devices by device. So they had the Apple Watch, they had other kind of smartwatches, they had the Echo, and they had the Google Home. And it was noticeable that searching for answers was not in the top use cases of the Echo. This is not surprising for anybody who has an Echo, because it's very bad at this. And so I think a lot of this growth is Echo growth.
Yep.
Right. So I'm sure the Google Home is selling well, especially because they pushed it really hard through the holidays and it was very cheap.
Yeah, they did.
But the Echo was the top selling device on Amazon, was also super cheap. The Echo Dot was $30 or something. And just anecdotally, it just seems like the Echo is everywhere. It's integrated with everything. The Echo is not about voice search. And I think it will be interesting to see how much it becomes about voice shopping. Most of the worst use cases sound to me like shopping.
Yeah.
Unless it's reordering something that you are very confident of what the thing is, in which case the use case is perfect. If it's anything that you haven't bought before, you need some kind of mechanism, right? Like,
absolutely.
Who just blindly buys the whatever Amazon thinks is the the thing you should buy. So what's my point? I think my point is, I don't think we've really figured this stuff out yet. There's plenty more to come on the device side. I dislike voice as a user interface for actually most things. So far, because no authentication, right? And anybody who's got young kids, especially, we actually have turned our Echo off, because the kids were just too annoying, and actually so were the grandparents. And so, you can't listen to a song the whole way through because somebody's changing the track before.
Oh my gosh, you have that too? They have no patience.
Right, the fart jokes, the other jokes, the grandparents asking how much wood a woodchuck chuck, woodchuck could chuck wood. It's infuriating.
Yep.
If people actually want to use stuff, they can't, because nobody knows whether they say, they want the temperature a degree hotter. Do they go, Alexa, change the Nest in the hallway to +1 degree, or do they say, Alexa, turn the temperature up, or do they say, Alexa, it's like all of the worst bits of command line with no autocomplete and no way of telling what you can and can't do.
Way too loose.
You walk in and it's like, it's the worst bits of command line coupled with hotel room showers. Right? And anybody who travels a lot for business, why do they not have a standardized way that a shower works in a business hotel? You walk in, you're like, okay, there's 3 knobs. I only need 2 knobs, and I don't know what this one does. And how can I just have a sensible temperature shower? This is crazy. And I think Alexa is like the worst of that, coupled with a command line where you don't even know that you can have a shower in the first place.
That is too funny.
So it works well when in your own environment, when you've learned the exact things you can do, but we're a long way off general use case, I think. Voice search, on the other hand, which is not captured in the 103% growth necessarily, but will be growing very fast. They just don't release the numbers. Could be as much as 20% of all mobile searches now, apparently. My view is that's mainly incremental searches. So I wrote a blog post entitled "The Next Trillion Searches." So back of the envelope calculation, there are 1 trillion desktop searches a year. We now know that half of all searches are desktop, half are mobile. So that's another 1 trillion mobile searches. I argue that most voice searches are incremental. They're searches you wouldn't have done if you didn't have the voice interface. And then all of those, so in other words, there's another 1 trillion out there. I came to the other 1 trillion, by the way, because Google did some research on unfulfilled search needs. So they basically had a bunch of volunteers answer text messages during the day, so Google would text them and say, what have you wanted to know recently that you couldn't find out? And why could you not find it out? And the answers ranged from, well, I just didn't bother looking up because it was too stupid, to actually some quite reasonable reasons why people didn't look the stuff up. I was driving, my hands were full. I didn't have a device to hand, as well as some unfulfilled things like, I just don't know where to go to look for this information, or it would be too slow to gather this information. So you might think that Google can answer all your queries right now, but it clearly can't. If you think about a query like, okay, Google, is my train home on time? You're not going to get a sensible answer to that question. And that's a pretty simple end of things. Imagine, okay, Google, is it possible to reschedule the flight that I have booked next week to San Diego? And will it cost me less than $100? There's no way that they can answer those kind of queries. So where was I going with this? Yeah, so my point is Google did this research and they found that about 30% of serious search needs were currently unfulfilled.
Wow.
In other words, there's another 1 trillion searches out there, right? You do 1 trillion on the desktop, you do 1 trillion on mobile, and there's another 1 trillion that are currently not fulfilled, which are largely fulfilled by voice, either because you need conversational search, you need to go back and forth, or because you need your hands free, or you need to do it while you're doing something else, or whatever else. So my argument is voice search is mainly incremental, and we're in the very early stages of that as well. There's some super exciting stuff going on here. We start verging into the future of search stuff that we're going to talk about.
Absolutely. It is very contextual. And we had Dwayne Forster on the show a couple weeks back, and he gave us a lot of insight into where things are going. But there's so much training of the devices, and there's so much adoption of these devices, as well as your sessions inside of all the other platforms to make sure that you're sharing with your non-desktop or non-mobile. I mean, it's all going to be attributed back to you, and the environments have to learn your behavior. That's the only way they're going to be able to find what you're really looking for. It's a big crevasse there to be able to understand contextually what you mean, as opposed to what somebody else means by the very same input, right?
Absolutely, for sure. Not just understand you, but have any hope of finding the answer as well, because the answer may not be a web page, and that's been Google's premise on searching the web. But of course, their mission is broader than that. So, I think one little point though that connects the dots between the devices and voice search is, I don't know about your experience, but I've found voice search actually to be a much more social thing than the Echo type device control.
Right.
So where having the Echo in the room was, it's only just occurred to me, by the way, that all the time when I'm saying, hey, Alexa and okay, Google, people's devices are going off if they got us on loudspeaker. So sorry about that, everyone. So kids are annoying with Echo, but it's been really good to learn things collaboratively by searching Google, by asking questions. And my kids are old enough my eldest is certainly old enough to read and to type a query into Google. My youngest is only 5. And so he can kind of, he can do some bits of that, but certainly a voice interface is more collaborative and quicker. And when they have some question about how does something work, and I don't know the answer, it's more collaborative to look it up via voice than it is to go away on your little screen and read the answer.
Oh yeah, it turns into a game in the car because all of a sudden, mom's getting involved, kids are getting involved, and we're shouting at Siri because she's giving us prices on kilts when we're trying to find when the next movie's. Boy, I'm referencing kilts an awful lot here recently. I don't know what's going on.
Hopefully Alexa's not listening and start serving you some ads with some kilts. I want to point out we had a couple questions here on the stream here. Danny Richmond says, "Cheers, Will. You just turned up my heating in the house." Bob Helst wanted our thoughts on Apple's jump into the voice search. Even though they had Siri, they were kind of the first ones with Siri, but they're one of the last ones to get a personal device out there.
Yeah, so I recently made the switch to iPhone. I'd had the original one, the iPhone 3G, I think, was the last one I'd had. I'd had many years of Android, and I went back to iPhone recently. So I've kind of come in only seeing the latest of Siri, and my experience has been that it's kind of maps with what I think I've been reading about up to that point. Somewhat similar to the Amazon position. It's great at voice control. I will often set a timer or an alarm or those kind of things using Siri, but I would never do a general web search using Siri. And I'm not convinced that I'm going to, unless that becomes an interface into Google-esque search results. Like I could imagine doing literally a web search if I was going to get a Google search result back, which I think actually they've moved in that direction, right? Because that's the move with Google's increase in traffic acquisition costs last quarter or the quarter before was coupled to the API deal they have with Apple. So we're getting closer and closer integration on that front. But yeah, all of the other stuff, all the stuff that Google is good at with the contextual search and so forth, I think Apple's behind, and I think it's hard to catch up when you need query volume. It's the same reason that, I haven't even tried Cortana, but I'm guessing.
Well, I mean, they to wrap up the voice search conversation, I mean, Apple does have its query data from Siri, but also they have failed to launch on the HomePod, and they held back in December. I mean, it really does look like they're just not going to be in the game in the future, and they'll very, very much probably start latching on to the voice algorithms of Google, just because, I mean, you've got beta testing across the board with all these echoes out there.
Yeah, I mean, they all try and own every bit of the stack, but my experience has been, so certainly for me personally, the ideal stuff is Google software on Apple devices.
Right.
So I use my Apple MacBook mainly as a Chromebook, and all the Google stuff on my iPhone. And I wouldn't at all surprise me to see that become increasingly common.
Right.
But Apple has such a walled garden environment that they can kind of make things a less good experience if they want to, up to a point. It's back to the whole Facebook surfing user behavior thing. If they start making their devices worse than what you can get from Samsung or Google Nexus or whatever, Google Pixel, then that would be a problem. I'm not super bullish on Siri, but I'm not sure what the path to anything interesting is. I'm sure they will come out with the home devices. Like they are going to come out with the HomePod eventually, right?
Eventually.
Yeah, I don't know. There was a big in-depth article from Steven Sinofsky on Medium that I shared this morning, I think, that was a big wrap-up of CES. So like a massive, this huge article all about all of the different trends and themes and everything he's seen at CES this year. And one of the things he talked about was hating seeing more devices with microphones in. His view was, this is like putting screens on stuff. It's like I might want a fancy standing desk. I don't want a fancy standing desk with a subpar Android tablet embedded in it.
Right.
That's the bit that's going to go out of date and obsolete fastest. And you see this with car user interfaces.
Absolutely.
Right. And actually, we got a new car. It's the first time we've ever had a brand new car, actually. We got a new car last year, and it has Android Auto and Apple CarPlay or whatever it's called. And basically making that a dumb screen that your phone powers and it gets the updates every time Apple or Android want to update it. That's like so much better. This is the way it should work. So have other people run that software for you.
Right.
I think that applies to, if you're making a fridge, if you're making a standing desk, if you're making get the smart stuff out to people who are good at doing the smart stuff.
Yeah.
The big question for me is, which side of that divide is Apple on? Is Apple making incredible hardware, or are they actually making the smart stuff? And I don't think that's fully answered yet. Like, we know which side Google's on. It's not obvious to me which side Apple ends up on.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's an entire another conversation right there. There's so many. I mean, this is rich information, especially, understanding the battle of these smart devices. I mean, there's a lot of work being put into this and a lot of thoughts in the space. But I wanted to jump into your interview as well. We want to unpack with you. So for all of our guests, let's go ahead and drop into our featured guest here. Let's deep dive with Will Critchlow.
Now it's time for Edge of the Web featured interview with Will Critchlow, founder and CEO of Distilled.
All right, but before anything, we want to make sure that we reference one of our sponsors. We are 2 months away from the next SMX, the leading conference for SEO and SEM professionals. Will actually take place March 13th to the 15th in San Jose. We actually were out there a couple of years back. The SMX agenda has tracks focusing on SEO, SEM, and retail with topics like AMP, voice search, progressive web apps, video ads, shopping, campaigns, and much more. Also, SMX offers 6 pre-conference workshops to choose from for additional training, and you'll also have plenty of opportunities for networking. Buy your all-access ticket before February 3rd, and you can save $300 plus. The Edge of the Web listeners will also save an additional 10% off of your ticket when you use discount code EDGE. So buy your tickets now for SMX West 2018 in San Jose, March 13th through the 15th. Rates go up right after February 3rd, so don't forget to use the discount code EDGE to save an additional 10% off. So we certainly appreciate our new sponsors from SMX. All right, Will, jump in. We certainly did jump in on a lot of news here, but let's tell our audience about who you are. Will Critchlow is the founder and CEO of Distilled, and they provide online marketing services from offices in London, New York, and Seattle. Distilled also hosts the Search Love Conference series and produces the popular online training series platform, Distilled U, that runs the SEO split testing platform, Distilled ODN. If you've not paid attention to Distilled, shame on you, listeners, and watchers. You've got to know what they've been doing over the years, and certainly recognizing Will. Will, give us your history, your backstory of how you got to be where you are.
Yeah, sure thing. So, Distilled is now coming into our 13th year. So we started in 2005, and the web was kind of a different place back then. So my co-founder and I, Duncan Morris and I, started the business, and we're old school friends. So we went to high school together, built some websites through the .com bubble. For those of you just experiencing the cryptocurrency bubble, it was like that with actual company stocks. And yes, we built some websites, and then wanted to start our own business after college. And 2005. We had, at that point, we weren't married, we were renting, didn't have kids, no dependency. So we started this little business that became Distilled. And back then, before Twitter and Facebook and social media was a big driver of traffic, search was the biggest game in town. We got into the search game and built up a relationship with Moz, SEO Moz, as they were back then. And that eventually led to us opening up an office in Seattle, and then a year later in New York. And we'd really the whole business, we built this we started out building websites, as I said, and the thing that really drove us was building websites that helped businesses. Back then, if you remember the web, it was full of Flash and full of pretty websites that didn't actually help the businesses in question. And we felt that many small businesses in particular were getting a bad deal, and we were trying to build more effective websites, and we came at it from the business angle. And so that was the thing that really stuck with us. That was the thing that still drives us today, is trying to figure out how to help our clients and our customers actually succeed better, actually make a difference in their business. And so all of the things we've done tie into that. So the Search Loft conference series, as you mentioned, Distilled ODN, the online training, all these things are kind of help yourself, I suppose. And we figured that the best way to achieve what we're trying to achieve in this fast-moving environment where nothing's the same from certainly over a 5-year period, is we have to as much discover and invent the future as just predict it. And so that's where the most recent stuff has come into play. So you mentioned the ODN, the Optimization Delivery Network. This is our platform for SEO split testing. This is our most recent initiative, and is, we think, kind of an important way of attacking the ways that Google is more and more of a black box, and it's increasingly hard to figure out just from first principles what's going to make a difference as a ranking factor or whatever else, and that we actually need to test that in the real world.
Those tools are fantastic. You also, you and your team over at Distilled also put together a great resource for that's online, obviously, called Distilled Searchscape, which is a collection of all your predictions for the future of search. One of the first topics to touch is machine learning and RankBrain. So as you're trying to unpack and be able to do split testing, and you're talking about it getting more and more difficult to be able to really understand from Google's standpoint how they're doing it, RankBrain really has jumped in and offered another challenge on how you can predict the behavior, right?
Yeah, so I mean, firstly, from a branding perspective, they're trying to convince us that RankBrain is just that query preprocessor bit of the algorithm. Right. It's such a good name. They totally should have called the whole machine learning algorithm RankBrain. But so I'm going to talk about the whole stack. So historically, Google had a big aversion to using artificial intelligence, machine learning in the organic search algorithm. So under Amit Singhal, the previous head of search, they wanted to understand what their systems were doing. So they always wanted to be able to answer the question, why is website A outranking website B for this query? Internally, their engineers wanted to be able to answer that question. And they were kind of scared of anything that didn't let them do that. This wasn't always the case on paid search. So they've used this kind of machine learning technology on the paid side for many years, and trusted that because there was a real objective function to optimize towards, which was just their revenue, essentially. So how much money do they make from the auction? They could measure that perfectly. Whereas they couldn't measure user satisfaction with organic search in quite the same way. That reluctance has entirely gone. This is our understanding these days. Under Sundar, under the new head of search, John Gianandrea, they are wholeheartedly embracing machine learning. And so I think we're just going to see a whole load more of this. And yeah, you're right. It makes it harder to understand from the outside what's going on. It potentially means that ranking factors can be different in different query domains. It makes it easier to do all the personalization and all the stuff we were talking about before, the contextual kind of stuff. And this could happen incredibly quickly. I don't know if you saw the article. There was an incredible in-depth article in, I think it's New Yorker magazine, or I'd have to look it up, it might be the New York Times, about the team that rewrote Google Translate using modern Google developed machine learning technology. So this was, you might have heard of Jeff Dean, who's the legendary Google engineer. He's the Chuck Norris of engineering at Google. There's a whole load of memes about him and all the rest of it. And he basically went to the Translate team and said that he thought that they could rebuild the Translate engine into a machine learning setup. And the project lead said, sure, you come back to us in a year and show us what you've got. And he said, I could do it in 3 months. And so he took a team of, I think, just 3 engineers, and in fact came back in a single month with a version that was not only better than the state of the art, which, bear in mind, had been developed over 10 years by thousands of engineers. Not only was it better, the delta, the improvement, was bigger than the improvement they've made in the entire preceding 10 years. And this just shows us that there's so much coming into play here, but the combination of the engineering talent, the breakthroughs they've had in the algorithms, the insane computing power that Google has to throw at this stuff, and just the whole thing combined, we're at that tipping point where it's suddenly this stuff is producing powerful results. And I mean, you see it in the game playing sphere with AlphaGo and AlphaZero. I think we're going to live through some interesting times.
You better believe it. And that's amazing that there's such radical and quick changes. I mean, Google's been, you're right, built on thousands of engineers, and there's thousands of tests going on all the time. And to be able to, and they're continually investing in these rogue projects that are exploratory in nature. But boy, are they finding some great return on their investments now, and they're changing their pathway in such a great degree, and everything is stacked upon everything else from their progression. But my gosh, there's some radical changes that are happening right now in Google, are there not?
Yeah, absolutely. Did you see the AlphaZero?
No, not yet. No. Oh, so yeah. We caught that. Yep.
This was the chess playing program that taught itself chess.
Right.
So AlphaGo was the program that they taught to play Go better than any human and better than any software, I believe. AlphaZero was the version that now beats not only the best. So computers have beaten humans for a long time now, but this can beat the best computer program that we've written. And it taught itself. All they did was give it the rules of chess, and it played itself for a few days, and then casually wandered out and beat. Is it called Snapfish? I think basically the state-of-the-art program that can beat human grandmasters.
Right.
And it was incredible. There's a YouTube video, again, in a Wired article, I think, of I'm not a chess expert, but I played a little bit, and seeing it just destroy this program that can beat grandmasters, and the program just does not see it coming. It thinks AlphaZero is making mistakes, and the human grandmasters don't understand what it's doing either, and then suddenly it wins. And you're like, oh, that people have been thinking about this for a long time. That's incredible.
Stockfish is the tool they were testing against. It keeps on going. It harkens back to this war. Remember War Games back in 1984 with Matthew Broderick, and all of a sudden it starts playing against it. It's learning itself at a incredible rate. You're about to let the programming that was set in place to start learning so much more quickly. What's going to happen when we have no control of the reins anymore, and it's thinking for us, and it's making the best decisions for us, and all of a sudden we have Skynet and Terminators on the street, right?
Well, I'm an optimist about this stuff. I think we're going to have these incredible smart programs doing our bidding, but we'll see.
Wanted to jump in here. We have some Facebook comments here. Robin Lord asked a little bit ago. She has said shopping on Alexa usually starts by narrowing down products with voice search and then serves you recommendations through the app. Do you think personal assistants will have more potential in removing friction for initial search?
Oh, they're actually dovetailing into this type of programming, right? If the program is actually set to start learning from you and you're allowing this level of openness, right? Man, it's going to take off like a skyrocket. But go ahead, Will.
Yeah, well, I mean, so I joked before about would you just pick the thing that Amazon suggested you should buy? I mean, actually, the answer is maybe yes. The narrowing it down, I think, is a I don't know. I'm in two minds. There are some things where I feel like if you're going to narrow it down, it doesn't really matter what the input is. You could input that. If you're going to be working on a screen, you can start the search however you like. Maybe there's a bit of friction removed by starting with a voice search. Is it 10x game changing? I think probably not. What I think is more exciting is when the technology gets to the point that it either doesn't have to ask any follow-ups, it can just get you the best thing and that's good enough and you're confident enough in it, or it can do the quick voice follow-up. It can be like, I found you a couple options. Does this one sound like the right one? Like you can imagine a personal assistant or something, a human personal assistant doing. That's not going to be a way that you probably choose fashion, right? Like, if you're into clothes, that's not going to be how you buy a new jacket, I don't imagine. But if you are just looking for some new sports socks, then sure, like, I don't see why that.
Yeah, so you're going to be separating some of the more utilitarian, easy to transact decisions. You're going to have that where voice search will really be able to help you. But will learning get in the place where those much more contextual decisions really start learning from you as from an assistant to this concierge mindset, right?
Yeah, I mean, yes, probably. And also, I think the bar is probably quite low. And I was thinking about this the other day. I don't know if your behavior is similar, but I was thinking about, where do I spend money? As in, what website? Not in the real world, mm-hmm. in the online world. Where do I go and spend money? So, think about it just on your mobile device. So where do you spend the most money? And for me, we started doing our grocery shopping online. So that probably wins because we're shopping there every week. It's not the same order every week, but it's got a whole bunch of predictability about it. And, there's only a certain number of degrees of freedom and variables. And, how many nights are different people out? Do we have friends coming? What do we want to cook? We cook from that whole set of things. I spend money on things like Airbnb or flights, maybe through the apps. The degrees of freedom for the big purchases are not that huge. And if you think about how many purchases are completely unpredictable, I wonder how big that set really is. And especially if you've got access to some of the search history and you've got some access to some of that stuff, like what just comes out of the blue and you just go, oh, I'm just buying this thing, like right. Surprise. Whereas actually, the bigger purchases, you've probably done some research, you've looked around. If you had access to that whole browsing, searching history, you could probably guess which one you were going to choose. Right. You could probably be like, okay, I'm ready to buy the camera now.
Yep.
And it could be like, okay, I know which one you mean because I've watched you do all those searches. So yeah, I don't think some of that is crazy science fiction. I think we'll probably see variations there.
Yeah, what you're seeing is the definition of the schema, right? Is that there's different areas of transaction, different areas in which it's going to be taking a little bit more to learn from, but eventually it's going to have all the different areas in which you behave, and they're going to get better and better in those spaces. We've been talking about the growth of voice assistants, right? So we've been talking about how they're going to impact on search results. Will users even click to a website in the future? I mean, honestly.
Yes. So depends how you define a website, but yes, I'm kind of bullish on the web in one form or another for at least my prediction horizon, right? So yes, 5+ years out, we'll still be clicking on websites. I think for all of the talk, as I said before, I think voice is mainly incremental. Mm-hmm. I think typing text, reading text still have a place. Mm-hmm. There's a reason why we do that. There's a reason why you text your friends rather than pick up the phone and speak to them.
Right.
Even though you've been able to pick up your phone and speak to them since before you were able to text them, and we've evolved for speaking and listening, there's so much that's better about text, right? The asynchronicity, the scannability, the copy and paste ability, the editability, all of these things mean that I don't think text is going anywhere. And so, yes, the websites may not look exactly the same, but yes, we'll click through and we'll read. I think so.
Very good, very good. Well, we hope so. Hey, another factor that you point out in your searchscape is moving towards implicit search queries. Can you explain to our audience what those are and what impact they'll actually have in the future?
Yeah, so this is very closely tied into all the contextual stuff that we've been talking about. So what we defined was the difference between an implicit and an explicit portion of a search query. So the explicit search query is everything that you actually type in, or all the words you actually say. The implicit elements are all of the bits that you did, all the things that are known from your history or from anything else that the device knows about you. So that could be where you are in the world. It could be what you've done recently. It could be your history. It could be all kinds of contextual elements. And so, I mean, good examples are you can now reliably do the search restaurants and expect to get sensible results.
Right.
Where that was the kind of query that I remember mocking when people would come to us when we first started running Search Lab, so 2009, 2010. I vividly remember doing a keyword research talk and mocking the business owners who came to you saying they wanted to rank for queries like restaurant. Because who on earth searches for a restaurant? That doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Like, what do you even expect? If you think in a keyword match world, it doesn't, of course, that's not going to work. But these days, that kind of query works fine. So basically, implicit is everything the device knows about you, which is an incredible amount. They have APIs for whether you're walking in a vehicle, whether you're what you're nearby, which direction you're facing, a million different things, and all of those things feed into answering that personalized search query of what you might actually be looking for. Right
Absolutely, and I mean, these getting back to these smart speakers, there's also they're echolocating you. They know where you are in the room, and eventually they know what areas you go to be able to do certain things, like the pantry, like the kitchen, and they'll certainly understand your behavior again and again and again as you adopt that. And not to circle back around to voice search, but it is another implicit connection, correct? Yeah, I mean, if you go to history.google.com, you can see your search history unless you've turned it off. And incidentally, it's also a bit freaky that you can actually listen to your previous voice searches. I don't know if you realize that they're saving all of those. I found that I knew that they must be, or I knew that they could be, but actually listening back to some of those queries where they were done in the car and you can hear the kids in the back seat or whatever, that was kind of intrusive. Anyway, but point being, go and have a look through your search history. Right. Realize how often you do the same searches over and over again. If I ask you to give me a typical search that you do, you'll give me some highbrow, long, I was looking for this quote from a really great author that time. No, like most of your search queries are not that. Most of your search queries are the exact same things over and over again. They're websites that you've been to before. They're things you looked up before. That, especially with voice commands. They're things you've done before. Navigate to home, navigate to work, set a timer for 30 minutes. But there's a lot of this stuff that, they're not unique. And I think that applies just as much to the queries we type as the queries we say. Oh, the banality of voice search, right? Yeah. Now, so in the space of maturing, are we also going to be? Do you see the human participation in this maturing as well? Because we're certainly comfortable in this space, but we've certainly adopted social behaviors online. We certainly adopted. I mean, it's an ecosystem right here. As voice gets more and more adopted, will we also change our vernacular? I mean, this is that. We absolutely will. Yeah, for sure. In fact, we already have. I think we already learned once, right? It's not natural to search the way that we search. Nope. The keyword string type of searching. People who didn't grow up with that absolutely will learn a new way. We'll have to relearn. Mm-hmm. You already see it, I think. I think. I already mentioned doing a search like restaurant that you wouldn't have done 10 years ago. Absolutely. I think that's just one example. I think there's tons of cases where you assume capabilities of Google that you wouldn't have assumed previously. And actually, this is one of the big problems with smart speakers is you assume capabilities that they actually don't have yet. Because they seem so, they understand every word you say in a kind of raw technical sense. They understand the word's meaning. They just can't do anything with the sentence. And so the voice recognition is exceptional. That has really, I'm absolutely blown away across all of the platforms, whether it's Alexa, whether it's Siri, whether it's Google. Mm-hmm. The voice recognition is phenomenal. That just highlights how bad the language understanding is. It can't do anything. It knows what you said, but it can't do anything with it. But yes, we absolutely will learn. And I hope the period where we have to learn these kind of command line-esque exact phrasing is short, and we get quickly to a point where we can phrase it in a much more natural
kind of way.
Yeah, I think it's going to be this hybrid of participation. You're absolutely right. Hey, we really want our listeners and our watchers to understand about the ODN. Can you share some more understanding of how the Distilled ODN works?
Yeah, for sure. If anybody wants to get more information, they can go to odn.distilled.net and get the full rundown. But essentially the way it works, we called it the ODN, the Optimization Delivery Network, because it deploys like a CDN, like a content delivery network. Or if you already have a CDN, it deploys just inside your CDN. And what this essentially does is it's making server-side changes. So this enables us to run SEO split tests. So this was a approach pioneered by, you might have read an article by Pinterest. Etsy has written some stuff on this as well. Mm-hmm. There's some big fundamental differences between the way that you split test for SEO versus the way you split test for, say, conversion rate or user experience and those kind of things. Mm-hmm. With SEO tests, you can't split the audience because you're essentially talking about an audience of one. You're talking about Googlebot, and so you can't do all the kind of cooking and JavaScript stuff that you would do with say Optimizely or something like that. What you do instead is you split your pages. This works best on large sites with tons of pages of a similar kind of page setup, similar page template. So imagine an e-commerce site, for example. You've got a whole bunch of product pages, and you have a hypothesis that a particular change would be good for those product pages and help them perform better in search. Mm-hmm. What our platform lets you do is deploy that change automatically to just a percentage of those pages, and then monitor the performance of those pages versus the control. And there's some fancy statistics that comes into play, but essentially apply some math and figure out if there's a statistically significant uplift as a result. And that's kind of the key thing. There's a secondary benefit of our platform as well, which is particularly for kind of enterprise type sites that are very slow to make changes, or where it's very hard or expensive to make certain kinds of changes. We have a bunch of clients where we recommend a change and it takes them a very long time to make those changes. Mm-hmm. One of the other benefits of our platform is that it enables agility, so it enables them to make those changes much more quickly and deploy them fully server-side, so it looks, as far as users and Google are concerned, just as if you deployed the code change to your own site.
That's very cool. And I mean, the sheer fact that the optimization, the conversion rate optimization tools have been out there and widely adopted. The sheer fact that this type of SEO technology is there, you've got to embrace it, because that's the other side of the coin. You've got to be able to demonstrate the testing and the true scientific method towards better content, more valuable content in the eyes of the searchers. And to have something like that available is fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. No. We're pretty excited about it.
Oh, you're more than welcome. So we threw a bit on screen there. So is there a recommended page traffic count that a website should be before signing up there?
Well, so as I said, to do the split testing, you do need a reasonable size of site. So anybody who's having trouble deploying changes, or who has difficulty making agile changes to their site, it could be good for. Mm-hmm. For the split testing specifically, our rule of thumb is that you need a site section, a group of pages that get 1,000 organic visits a day, mm-hmm. also, or more, obviously, in order to be able to run statistically significant split tests.
Excellent. Could I hear from you? What else are you doing right now with Distilled, as well as what you're doing on the speaker circuit?
Yeah, well, so the big upcoming, answering both those questions is I'm preparing for our next conference. So we have a Search Love conference coming up in San Diego mm-hmm. in March 26th and 27th mm-hmm. of March. And we're in early bird pricing right now. So I think there's still a few tens of tickets left in the early bird pricing. So people should head on over to distilled.net/events for more on that. Our San Diego conference is pretty cool because it's in San Diego and it's Southern California. And for anybody in London or Indianapolis or really many other parts of the world right now, Southern California is pretty great.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So we run 3 of these conferences a year. We do one in London, one in Boston, one in San Diego. Mm-hmm. I would say like London has the big city feel. Boston has this kind of slightly academic air. San Diego is basically on a beach. But it's a great conference. We've got a great lineup of speakers. We've just announced the full speaker lineup, and we'll be announcing exactly the topics and things they're talking about over the next week or two.
Can you give us any insights into who's going to be speaking?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I will be there. The full list is on the site if you keep scrolling down. But so we've got Rand Fishkin, Will Reynolds, Emily Grossman, Dan Tommaso, Aleda coming in from overseas. You can see the full list right there. But a whole bunch of old friends and new faces, and some real serious expertise to bring to this show. It's going to be a good one.
Very cool, and reasonably priced as well, especially for a 2-day conference. That's fantastic. To wrap up, could I ask you, because I mean you've been in search for such a long time, what really bugs you about your industry right now?
Well, it's not a new thing, and I think it bugs many people. But it's very hard to tell opinion from fact, and I mean this is not at all limited to our industry, but we find that it's really hard to be right about hard things. And this is why we built the ODN platform. The number of tests that we've run where we thought we knew what the answer was going to be, and we got something very different, where we've seen either uplifts that nobody expected, or things we thought were going to be positive that were actually negative, or all kinds of things. You realize how much of best practice is not necessarily built on science and fact. And I think it's really easy for that stuff to get amplified and repeated in the echo chamber. And so, I guess it's tough, but it's that trying to, I just love seeing new original research when people actually dig into these things. And, there's a whole bunch of people doing really great work, and I want to see their stuff amplified. And it always annoys me when you see something amplified that I feel doesn't have that same level of thought or rigor applied to it.
No, I would agree. I would agree with you there, and you certainly are taking the scientific method to SEO so much more than most, and I think that really defines what Distilled does. But you're leading in making sure that people understand that there has to be data. You have to have experimental methodology. You just can't throw out their top 10 things that I think are working, and without any type of evidence or any type of information to back you up. And I think we are seeing the drop off of the repurposers of these top hit type of discussions, and you're seeing more and more serious focus on SEO. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a lot more, a lot of that research kind of going on. Mm-hmm. But there's also, I think it's the rise of, it's also put talking about earlier in the context of Facebook, that it's easy to get attention for a lot of things. And I think it's just continuing to look at things with a critical eye, look at things from first principles, trying to ask if you understand why something would be happening. All of that kind of approach is just important to remember.
Well, conversely, what excites you about your industry right now?
I mean, actually, we kind of slightly touched on the. I mentioned I'm an optimist about the technology. Mm-hmm. I just love the way that tech is getting better. Like, you think about how different it is to have the world's knowledge at your fingertips today versus 20 years ago, and you think about how much better it's going to be, and how much more we can do with all those things, and when we stand on those shoulders. And I mean, just specifically on the machine learning piece, I saw Google announce yesterday, I think, the Auto ML, which is their machine learning platform. So basically, the idea is their machine learning platform will figure out how to machine learn on your data. And so if you just have the data, you can start applying some of these techniques. And I'm an optimist about that stuff. So I'm just excited to play with the new tech.
You look and sound like a technophile there, and it certainly demonstrates that as well. We want to learn a fun fact of you before we wrap up here. So lay it on us. What you got there?
So you asked me this in the pre-prep, and I spent a long time. What did you ask me for? But some amazing fact about myself or something, and I was like, I don't think I have enough of a claim to fame. The best I could come up with was some basketball exploit from many years ago. But I don't know. I didn't go to school with anyone famous. I I'm not sure I have anything exceptional enough for you.
Oh, you're selling yourself short, and that's the problem. What you don't see is amazing, right? You got a bunch of people out here, I'm sure, would lift you up. I think ODN is an amazing tool, and I'm just going to give that to you. How about that?
Well, I'll take that one.
So we want to make sure that our listeners go over to distilled.net/events/search love-San Diego. March 26th and 27th is the Search Love Conference. We certainly recommend going out there, and you got an early bird pricing out there. Should be a good time to travel to Southern California from pretty much anywhere, right?
I think so, yeah. And if you're local, well, you should definitely come along.
And if you can't make that, you're also going to be in Boston again in June, correct?
That's right, yes.
Excellent. Well, we'll certainly have the links to everything in our show notes page. We want to recommend everybody follow Will on his Twitter handle, Will Critchlow. You can also track him down on LinkedIn and obviously distilled.net. Any final thoughts for our SEO and digital marketing audience today?
Final thoughts. Well, yeah, just to wrap up, I think we've talked about a lot of this future tech. I would just encourage everyone to stay curious. Like, get your hands on some of the new tech, get your hands on the devices, try this stuff out, put yourself in the consumer's shoes, but also do some of the pro stuff, the super user type, push them to their limits, understand what they can do. It's all going to be changing. You could be an expert in any of this stuff, and the old things that we've learned over the past decade or two, I mean, hopefully they're a foundation, but there's tons of new stuff to learn. So I would just, that would probably be the final message. Stay curious, get curious, and figure out how all this new stuff is going to work.
That's awesome. Stay curious inside of SEO and all the spaces inside of digital tech, digital marketing tech. Well, thank you so much, Will, for your time today. I appreciate you spending a little bit of time in the evening there in the UK.
Yeah, it's been a blast. Thanks for having me on.
You're more than welcome. We'll certainly watch from afar. And if you're ever in Indianapolis, let us know. And
be sure to look you up.
we may actually drop in on you in London on our excursions out there. So thanks to all of our listeners at Edge of the Web Radio. Special thank you to our colleagues at Site Strategics, as well as our guest, Will Critchlow. Be sure to check out all of our must-see videos and audio over at edgeofthewebradio.com. Be sure to sign up for the newsletter. Also, tag us if you're interested in becoming a sponsor during the show, because the door is open. We'd love to lift your brand up and be able to introduce you to our dedicated listeners. So from all of us at Edge of the Web Radio, make sure that to listen and listen often and download. So with that, we want to say fond farewell, and do not be a piece of cyber driftwood. Take care. Bye-bye.